The kitchen smelled of garlic and rosemary, the kind of scent that usually brings me comfort. I moved around the stove, stirring, tasting, adjusting, my little rituals to stay grounded after a long day. Then my phone buzzed on the counter, cutting through the calm like a cold draft. I dried my hands on a towel and picked it up, already bracing myself. Working late tonight. Big meeting with the directors. The words glowed on the screen, neat and sterile, almost rehearsed. I read them twice and my chest tightened, not from shock, but from the dull ache of familiarity. It was the same excuse I'd heard so many Fridays before. A bitter laugh almost escaped me, but I pressed my lips shut, holding it in like a secret. I set the phone face down, as if that could block out the truth buried in those lines. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, every second reminding me of how far we'd drifted. I stirred the pot again, forcing myself to focus on the rising steam, the scrape of the spoon against the pan. But deep down, unease curled inside me, whispering what I didn't want to admit. I tried to silence it, tried to believe him, but the whisper wouldn't go away. I leaned against the counter, spoon still in my hand, staring at the phone like it might confess more than the message it held. Part of me wanted to believe him. Mark was ambitious, always chasing promotions, always talking about late-night meetings. But another part of me, the quieter, sharper part, knew when something didn't add up. That part had been restless for months. The house felt too big when he wasn't there, every creak of the floorboards reminding me I was alone in more ways than one. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the simmer of the pan, the sound of bubbling sauce. Dinner for two had become dinner for one so many times lately that setting an extra plate felt like theater, a performance for a man who rarely showed up. I poured myself a glass of wine, the red liquid catching the kitchen light like a secret I couldn't name. "Big meeting with the directors," I muttered, letting the words roll off my tongue like a bad joke. My stomach knotted tighter, but I forced a deep breath, telling myself not to spiral. If I let suspicion take root, it would consume me. At least, that's what I thought then. I carried the wine glass to the table and sat down, staring at the empty chair across from me. It felt almost mocking, the way it stood there, waiting, expectant, as if daring me to keep pretending everything was fine. I thought back to when Mark and I first moved in, when dinner meant laughter, shared stories, and stolen kisses before dessert. Now, it was silence and excuses typed out in sterile words. I pushed food around my plate, appetite fading with every bite. The truth is, I'd been making peace with small absences for months. His distracted eyes, his rushed goodbyes, the way his phone never left his side. I told myself it was just work, just stress, just life getting in the way. But deep down, I was keeping a tally, even when I didn't admit it. And tonight, that tally felt heavier than ever. I drained the last sip of wine, the warmth spreading through me doing little to soften the cold creeping in. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones, the way you feel a storm before the sky even darkens. Still, I clung to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. But as the night stretched on, I had no idea how close I was to being exposed to the truth I'd been avoiding. After cleaning up the dishes, I sank into the couch, phone in hand, trying to distract myself. Scrolling through Instagram had become my way of filling the silence, a small escape from the ache of waiting. My thumb hovered lazily, stopping on a local bar's live stream. I tapped it without much thought, expecting nothing more than background chatter, the kind of noise that makes you feel less alone. The screen lit up with dim lighting, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter echoing through my living room. I smirked faintly at a group of friends singing off-key in the corner, their joy so far removed from the heaviness sitting in my chest. It was supposed to be harmless, just strangers living their lives while I tried to forget the hollowness of mine. But then the camera shifted, panning across tables with the lazy curiosity of whoever was filming. My stomach tightened as my eyes followed along, and in the next second, the air left my lungs in one brutal rush. There he was, Mark. Sitting at a candlelit table, his hand tangled with a blonde woman's, his smile wide and unguarded. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. For a moment, I froze, phone clutched in my hand as if I'd misread the scene. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out the voices coming from the stream. I blinked, hoping the image would shift, that maybe it was just a trick of the camera. But no, there was Mark, leaning in close, his thumb brushing across her knuckles like it was the most natural thing in the world. Rage shot through me so fast it burned, a fire racing up my spine. I felt my chest tighten, my face grow hot, and yet beneath the fury was something colder, an ache so sharp it nearly buckled me. Months of suspicion, months of excuses, all crashing into one undeniable moment playing out live for the world to see. And there he was, my husband, acting as if I didn't exist. The comments scrolled across the bottom of the screen, people laughing, cheering, noting how cute the couple looked. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone, anger flooding every corner of me. Cute? Charming? No. What they were seeing wasn't romance. It was betrayal caught on camera, and I was the unwilling witness. I couldn't look away. Every gesture felt like a knife, twisting deeper with each second. The way he leaned toward her, whispering something that made her laugh. The way his eyes softened, eyes that had turned cold when they looked at me. It wasn't just a fling across a crowded bar. It was intimacy. Intimacy he'd stripped from me and handed to someone else. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles turned white. The room around me blurred, and all I could see was them. Mark and that woman, their little world captured in perfect clarity, while mine collapsed in silence. It wasn't just betrayal, it was exposure. He wasn't hiding in some shadowy corner. He was out in the open, unashamed, as if his double life deserved applause. And something shifted in me. The hurt was still there, raw and jagged, but it hardened into something sharper. If Mark thought he could humiliate me live for strangers to watch, then he had no idea what I was capable of. My heart was breaking. Yes, but it was also building something stronger, something that wouldn't just endure, but strike back. My hands shook as I hit the call button, the screen glowing with his name. Each ring felt like a drumbeat against my chest, louder and heavier as the seconds dragged on. No answer. I tried again, this time biting down on the inside of my cheek, hoping the vibration in his pocket would jolt him back to reality. Still nothing. The silence on the other end was deafening, louder than any excuse he could have given me. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint against the black glass, and something inside me cracked. He wasn't ignoring a call, he was ignoring me. All of me. The woman who'd built a home with him, cooked meals for him, waited through countless late nights. That rejection, that deliberate silence, cut deeper than the sight of him with her. It was proof. Proof I was no longer a part of his world. My breath came in sharp bursts, but then it steadied, cooling like metal hardening in fire. I tapped the record button, capturing every second of the live stream. His smile, his touch, her laughter. If he thought he was untouchable, he was wrong. I wouldn't just be the humiliated wife watching from the sidelines. I'd be the one holding the evidence, the one rewriting the ending to this little show of his. I lowered the phone slowly, my fingers still tingling from gripping it so hard. The video continued streaming, showing him laughing, leaning closer, his hand gliding over hers like he had nothing to fear. He was so confident, so careless, and that made my anger burn hotter. Did he really believe I'd never find out? That my silence meant blindness? I replayed every moment in my head, the excuses, the late nights, the sudden distance. all the little red flags I had buried because I wanted to believe in us. In him. But now, here was the truth, unfolding right in front of me, live for anyone to see. And instead of crumbling under the weight of it, I felt myself rising. The tears that had threatened a moment ago, gone, replaced by clarity. My thumb hovered over the screen, recording every intimate second, every stolen gesture. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about exposure. He had turned our marriage into a stage, and tonight, I wasn't the victim in the shadows. I was the witness with the power to turn the spotlight on him, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that I would. I leaned back into the couch, the glow of the phone lighting up my face in the dark room. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't panic anymore. It was precision. Each beat steadied me, like a drum rolling into war. He thought he was untouchable, untamed, free to play this game behind a curtain of lies. But now, I had the curtain pulled wide open, and he didn't even know it yet. The live stream showed him raising his glass, clinking it against hers, grinning like a man without consequences. I zoomed in, capturing every detail, the candlelight flickering across his smug expression, the way her hand rested on his arm like she belonged there. Every second I recorded felt like a strike against him, a ledger filling with proof he could never erase. And as I sat there, breathing steady, I made a silent vow. If he wanted to humiliate me live, I would answer in kind. Not by shouting, not by begging, not by crumbling, but by making sure that one single moment, the moment he realized I was watching, would haunt him more than any word I could ever say. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the weight of every unsent word pressing down on me. I could have written 1,000 things, pleas, curses, demands, but none of them felt right. He didn't deserve my confusion, my pain, or even my questions. He deserved fear. Plain and sharp, fear that would crawl into his skin and stay there. So I typed the only sentence that mattered. I know where you are. I'm watching you right now. Don't you dare come back home tonight. The moment I hit send, a rush of heat pulsed through me, part fury, part liberation. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the surge of control I hadn't felt in so long. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the silent wife waiting at home while he lived his second life. No, I had just stepped into the game, and for the first time, he wasn't the one holding the pieces. I flicked my eyes back to the live stream, pulse hammering as the camera caught him glancing at his phone under the table. His face changed instantly, his smile faltering, his hand stiffening around the glass. There it was, the crack in his perfect act. Watching his eyes widen, watching the color drain from his expression, it was like witnessing a mask shatter in real time. The blonde leaned toward him, her brows furrowed, clearly confused by the sudden shift in his mood. He yanked his hand away from hers, fumbling to set his phone down as if the message had burned him. I could almost hear his mind racing, calculating, panicking. That confident grin he wore so easily just minutes ago? Gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw and a stiffness in his posture that gave him away completely. I sipped from the glass of water on the table beside me, the irony not lost on me. He thought he could toy with me, live freely in his betrayal, and keep me in the dark. But here he was, exposed, unraveling, while I sat calmly in my living room with the upper hand. For once, it wasn't me waiting for his excuses. It was him, sweating under the weight of my silence, knowing I was out there, watching. The live comments lit up with questions. What's wrong with that guy? He looks like he's seen a ghost. A few people even dropped laughing emojis, amused by his sudden change. I let a smile creep across my lips. They didn't know the truth, but he did. That's what mattered. The world thought he was cracking for no reason. But I was the reason. And that felt like the sweetest justice. I leaned forward, phone still in hand, watching every flicker of panic spread across his face. He kept shifting in his seat, pretending to laugh at something the blonde said, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted to the phone, then to the door, then back to the camera as if he knew, deep down, that somewhere out there, I was watching his downfall play out live. The blonde reached for his hand again, but this time he pulled back completely, his fingers trembling against the tablecloth. She looked puzzled, annoyed even, but I didn't care about her confusion. My focus was on him, the man unraveling in real time, his performance cracking under the weight of a single message. He could charm her all he wanted, but he couldn't charm his way out of the truth sitting in his pocket. As the comments poured in, mocking his sudden stiffness, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. It wasn't just revenge. It was balance being restored. For every night he left me alone, every excuse, every hollow smile, I now had this moment. A moment he'd never erase, never forget, because from here on, every time his phone buzzed, he'd wonder if it was me pulling the strings again. Mark never came home that night. Not the next one either. The silence of the house, once so suffocating, felt different now. Liberating almost. I changed the locks the following morning, sliding the new keys into my pocket with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The man who once believed he owned this space no longer had a claim to it. For the first time in a long while, the house felt like mine again. I sat with a lawyer 2 days later, papers spread neatly across the table. My voice didn't waver as I recounted the excuses, the lies, the betrayal caught in the glow of a live stream. The lawyer nodded, scribbling notes, her eyes sharp with understanding. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a severing of chains. Every signature I planned to make was a step toward reclaiming myself, toward rewriting the ending he thought he controlled. As for the blonde, she disappeared as quickly as she appeared. I wasn't surprised. Mistresses rarely stay when the promises of power and money crumble. And crumble they did. His world, our world, was unraveling piece by piece, and I didn't need to lift another finger to make it happen. He was exiling himself, destroying himself, while I stood steady on the other side of the fire. Nights used to feel endless, spent waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway, wondering what excuse would fall from his lips this time. Now I filled them differently. Dinners with friends, long baths where I let the silence feel like peace instead of punishment. I laughed more, louder than I had in years, and every burst of joy felt like a reclamation of the woman I had once buried beneath his lies. The neighbors whispered, "Of course. People always do when marriages crumble in public." But their looks didn't sting me the way I thought they would. If anything, I let them. Let them gossip. Let them speculate. Because for once, I wasn't the one hiding. I had nothing to be ashamed of. The shame belonged to him, stamped across his face that night on camera. A humiliation he couldn't edit or erase. Even the quiet moments felt different. Cooking dinner, I no longer stared at an empty chair across from me with dread. Instead, I plated food for myself, savoring each bite like an act of defiance. The wine tasted better, the nights felt warmer, and the air in the house finally belonged to me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. A week later, I walked into that same bar, the one where I'd first seen his betrayal unfold. This time, I wasn't alone. Friends surrounded me, laughter spilling from our table like music, glasses clinking under the warm glow of hanging lights. I wasn't hiding behind a screen or holding my breath for his excuses. I was present, alive, and finally free. At one point, I caught my reflection in the bar's window. I didn't look broken. I looked steady, certain, even a little dangerous in the way a woman looks when she's taken back her power. I scrolled through my phone casually, pausing on another venue's live video. Strangers laughing, couples leaning close, But for the first time, none of it made my chest tighten. I was unbothered, untouchable. As I set my phone down, a smile tugged at my lips. He had ignored my calls that night, but he would never ignore the moment he realized I was watching. That memory belonged to him now, etched in panic across his face, seared into the shame he carried. And me? I was done carrying anything that wasn't mine.
The day my husband introduced me as his little homemaker to the board of directors at his company's gala, I smiled politely while mentally reviewing the evidence I compiled proving I was the true architect of his most successful business innovations. In 2 months, I would present my patent applications and business records to his stunned executive team. But tonight I would play my part one final time. I am Elise Harrington, but most people in the business world know me only as the wife of Robert Harrington, founder and CEO of Pinnacle Solutions. My academic credentials, a PhD in computer science from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard, have been reduced to framed certificates gathering dust in our home office, replaced by the role of corporate spouse and hostess extraordinaire. When I met Robert, I was leading a promising AI research team at a technology incubator in Silicon Valley. He pursued me relentlessly, not just romantically but intellectually. "Your mind is extraordinary," he would say over late-night discussions about algorithmic efficiency and market applications. Together, we could build something revolutionary. I believed him. I believed we would be partners in every sense of the word. That belief led me to marry him after a whirlwind 8-month courtship, and subsequently to integrate my research with his business ventures. Looking back, I can map precisely how skillfully he executed his strategy of appropriation. The first project was collaborative, at least superficially. We developed a predictive analytics engine that became Pinnacle's flagship product. Robert handled the business development and investor relations. I architected the technical solution. When the press coverage emerged, I was conspicuously absent from the narrative. "A technical team under my direction," he would say in interviews, never mentioning that the team consisted primarily of his wife. "It's better for investor confidence," he explained when I questioned him. "They want to see a strong, singular vision. We know the truth, and that's what matters." I accepted this reasoning, focusing instead on our next innovation. Each time, the pattern repeated. My work, his acclaim. Over 5 years, I watched my contributions systematically erased from the company's history, my role reduced to supportive spouse in the official narrative. The wake-up call came during an evening when I overheard Robert speaking with Gregory Phillips, his chief financial officer and longtime friend, in his home office. I had come to discuss a breakthrough in our latest project, but paused outside the door upon hearing my name. "Elise is getting restless again," Robert said, talking about wanting more acknowledgement for her contributions. I could hear the dismissive quotation marks around the word. Gregory's laugh was uncomfortable. "You have to admit, Rob, the core algorithms were her design. The Hanover contract wouldn't have happened without her innovations. The concepts may have come from her research, but I'm the one who made them viable," Robert replied. "She's a theoretical academic, I'm a businessman. Ideas without execution are worthless." Still, Gregory persisted. "Maybe give her some formal role. Technical advisor or something. The board might actually." "The board follows my lead," Robert interrupted. "Besides, we have a good arrangement. She gets the lifestyle and security she wants, and I get to run my company without complications. The prenup ensures she'll never have any real claim on Pinnacle's assets. Why mess with a system that works?" I stood frozen outside that door, a proposal for our newest project clutched in my hand as the full reality of my situation crystallized. I wasn't a partner, I was an asset, a resource to be mined for valuable ideas, then kept comfortable but contained. That night, I began planning my response, not an emotional confrontation, but a strategic reframing of our relationship. If Robert saw our marriage as a business arrangement, I would approach it with corresponding pragmatism. First, I established independent documentation of my work. For each project I had contributed to at Pinnacle, I compiled comprehensive records, initial concept documents, development notes, testing protocols, all meticulously time-stamped and authenticated. I stored these records securely away from our home systems, which Robert's IT team maintained. Next, I consulted with a patent attorney, not one affiliated with Robert's extensive business network, but a specialist from another state recommended by a former colleague. Under her guidance, I began filing patent applications for my most recent innovations, careful to focus on concepts not yet implemented in Pinnacle's products. For 18 months, I maintained the appearance of the devoted corporate wife while systematically building my position. I opened separate financial accounts, reconnected with professional contacts, and quietly consulted on projects unrelated to Pinnacle's business, all while continuing to provide Robert with the brilliant innovations he had come to depend on. The most difficult part was suppressing my natural inclination to confront the injustice directly. Each time Robert presented my work as his own, each time he introduced me as an ornamental afterthought at corporate functions, I smiled and played my role while mentally cataloging the incident as further evidence. The culmination of my strategy came at Pinnacle's annual Innovation Showcase, an event where Robert traditionally announced the company's breakthrough developments to industry analysts and major clients. This year's centerpiece was to be an adaptive security protocol that promised to revolutionize data protection for enterprise clients, a system I had designed from concept to implementation. I sat in the front row as Robert took the stage, watching him prepare to claim sole credit for my work one final time. As he began his presentation, an assistant handed him a legal document. From my seat, I could see his expression shift from confusion to disbelief as he read the notice of patent approval. My patent approval for the very technology he was about to present. "Is there a problem, Robert?" I asked when he looked up and met my eyes. The remainder of the event was a masterclass in corporate damage control. Robert recovered quickly, announcing a strategic partnership with a new security firm, a shell company I had established months earlier as the holder of my patents. The analysts were intrigued by this unexpected development. The Pinnacle executives were visibly confused. In the aftermath, Robert demanded a private meeting. We sat across from each other in the Pinnacle conference room, the same room where my ideas had been harvested for years without acknowledgement. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice tightly controlled. "Establishing appropriate valuation for my contributions," I replied calmly. "Just good business practice. We're married. Your work at Pinnacle was part of our partnership. A partnership suggests equal recognition and shared benefit. You've presented my work as yours for 5 years while reducing me to a decorative accessory in the company narrative." He leaned forward, switching tactics. "Whatever issues you have with credit attribution, we can work them out. But filing patents independently crosses a line, Elise. It's practically corporate espionage. One cannot steal what rightfully belongs to oneself," I countered. "Every patent I filed is for my own original work, meticulously documented and legally distinct from Pinnacle's implemented products. I've been careful not to violate any proprietary rights. The prenuptial agreement covers marital assets and your ownership stake in Pinnacle. It does not entitle you to my intellectual property created independent of company resources." I slid a folder across the table. "My attorneys have reviewed the contract thoroughly. You might want your team to do the same." The negotiation that followed lasted weeks. Robert oscillated between threats of litigation, attempts at emotional manipulation, and finally, surprisingly reasonable settlement offers. The board of directors, once they understood the situation, recognized the precarious position Robert had created for the company. Having my innovations suddenly under independent control represented an existential threat to Pinnacle's product roadmap. In the end, we reached an agreement that benefited all parties. I would become Pinnacle's Chief Innovation Officer, with full acknowledgement of my prior and ongoing contributions. My patents would be licensed to Pinnacle under favorable terms, but I would retain ownership. The company's historical records would be amended to accurately reflect my role in its foundational technologies. Our marriage, however, did not survive the renegotiation. The trust had been irrevocably broken, not just by Robert's systematic appropriation of my work, but by the fundamental dishonesty about what our partnership meant. The divorce was surprisingly amicable, perhaps because Robert recognized the vulnerability of his position if we couldn't reach a reasonable settlement. 2 years have passed since then. Pinnacle continues to thrive, now with my name properly attached to the innovations that drive its success. Robert and I maintain a professional relationship that is cordial, if not warm. The industry publications that once described me only as Robert Harrington's wife now reference my technical contributions and leadership role. Yesterday, a young female engineer approached me after I gave a keynote address at an industry conference. I've been following your work since you were publicly recognized as the architect behind Pinnacle's core technologies, she said. But I've always wondered, why did you wait so long to claim credit? You must have known the value of what you were creating. I considered her question carefully before answering. I believed in a partnership that didn't exist. By the time I recognized the reality, extricating myself required strategic patience. Sometimes reclaiming your value means first documenting it beyond dispute. Wasn't it infuriating, watching someone else take credit for your innovations year after year? Of course, I acknowledged, but I channeled that frustration into meticulous preparation. Anger might have prompted a confrontation I wasn't positioned to win. She nodded thoughtfully. So you played the long game. I recognize that in business, as in chess, the winning strategy sometimes requires allowing your opponent to believe they're in control until they've overlooked your actual position on the board. As I watched her walk away, I reflected on how different my journey might have been had I understood earlier the importance of safeguarding my contributions. Now, as I mentor young innovators, particularly women, I emphasize this lesson. Partnership requires mutual recognition and respect, not just shared ambition. And when that respect is absent, the solution isn't immediate confrontation, but strategic reposition. The irony doesn't escape me that Robert's greatest business miscalculation was undervaluing his most important asset. In treating me as a silent partner rather than an acknowledged collaborator, he ultimately lost both my personal commitment and exclusive access to my professional innovations. Next month, I'm launching an independent research initiative focused on ethical applications of AI in healthcare, a field I've wanted to explore since my graduate studies, but set aside to support Pinnacle's commercial priorities. For the first time in nearly a decade, my name alone will appear on the founding documents. There's a particular satisfaction in seeing your own signature on something you've built, a satisfaction I had forgotten during those years in the shadows. Robert taught me an invaluable lesson, though surely not the one he intended. True partnership cannot exist without equality of recognition. In business and in life, we must insist upon proper valuation of our contributions, or create spaces where that value is self-evident. Sometimes the most powerful position in a negotiation is the one you build for yourself when others aren't paying attention. Acquisition terms are final, my stepbrother announced, sliding the contract across the boardroom table with a satisfied smile. Congratulations, Rebecca. You built something worth stealing. He didn't realize I had leveraged his ambition against him, and that his signature on those documents had just transferred controlling interests of his family's century-old publishing empire directly to me. I am Rebecca Chen, though professionally I've always used my mother's surname Harlow. At 34, I'm the founder and CEO of Artemis Digital, a boutique digital media company specializing in revitalizing traditional print publications for the modern era. 5 years ago, we were a struggling startup. Today, we're the acquisition target of Lancaster Publishing, the company that should have been partly mine by birthright. My history with Lancaster Publishing began when I was 12, the year my mother married Richard Lancaster, CEO and majority shareholder of the publishing dynasty founded by his grandfather. A widower with a 16-year-old son, Richard welcomed me into their sprawling Boston home with genuine warmth. His son, Alexander, made his feelings clear on my first night under their roof. "Don't get comfortable," he whispered as he passed me in the hallway. "You're not a real Lancaster. You'll never have a place here." Despite Alex's hostility, I found unexpected joy in my new life. Richard became the father I'd never had, encouraging my interest in literature and journalism, bringing me to the office on weekends to explore the vast archives of Lancaster's century of publications. While Alex was groomed to take over the company, attending board meetings, shadowing executives, I absorbed everything from the ground up, learning from editors, designers, and the digital team that was just beginning to grapple with the internet's disruption of traditional publishing. When Richard died unexpectedly during my second year of college, everything changed. Alex, newly graduated from Harvard Business School, took control of Lancaster Publishing with his inheritance of 60% of company shares. My mother received 10%, with the remaining 30% distributed among long-term executives and a family trust. At the memorial service, Alex made his first executive decision. "We're selling the brownstone," he informed my mother and me. The company is providing you a settlement. I expect you want your own place. The settlement was generous financially but devastating emotionally. Within a month, we were removed from the family home and effectively erased from the Lancaster narrative. My mother, heartbroken, retreated to her hometown in California. I stayed in Boston, determined to finish my degree in digital media and communications. 2 weeks after graduation, I received a certified letter. Lancaster Publishing was formally declining my application for their management training program. No explanation was given, but none was needed. Alex had made good on his promise. I would have no place in what should have been my family's company. Instead, I joined a struggling digital media startup, working 18-hour days to help transform traditional content for online audiences. When that company was acquired 2 years later, I used my small windfall to found Artemis Digital, focusing on a niche Alex and others in traditional publishing overlooked, revitalizing legacy publications with dedicated but aging readerships. Our model was different from the slash and burn approach of most digital transformations. We preserved editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue streams, respecting the core identity of each publication while making it viable for the future. We started small: literary journals, regional magazines, specialized industry publications, but our reputation grew as each project succeeded where others had failed. Throughout those years, I kept tabs on Lancaster Publishing through industry connections and my mother's small ownership stake, which provided annual reports. Under Alex's leadership, the company aggressively expanded its portfolio but struggled to adapt to digital disruption. Prestigious titles were gutted to cut costs, digital strategies shifted with every new consultant, and the company's reputation for editorial excellence deteriorated. Our paths crossed occasionally at industry events. Alex always greeted me with the same condescending smile. "Still playing with websites, Rebecca? How cute." He never bothered to learn what Artemis actually did, viewing digital media as beneath the dignity of true publishing, something to be delegated to subordinates while real executives made decisions about print and distribution. 3 years into building Artemis, I acquired a struggling but beloved literary magazine called the Inkwell Review. Founded in 1923 and known for publishing early works by some of America's most celebrated authors. Though its circulation had dwindled to just 15,000 subscribers, its archives and contributor relationships were invaluable. What I didn't know when making the purchase was that the Inkwell Review had once been owned by Lancaster Publishing, sold off by Alex in one of his first executive decisions as part of streamlining underperforming assets. 6 months after our acquisition, during a digitization project of the magazine's archives, our team discovered something extraordinary: a sealed envelope in the magazine's original incorporation documents, labeled for transfer of ownership only. Inside was an addendum to the original purchase agreement when Lancaster Publishing had acquired the Inkwell Review in 1967. The document stipulated that if Lancaster ever sold the magazine, a dormant ownership stake in Lancaster Publishing, 3% held in trust by the magazine's original family owners, would be included in the transaction. Alex had sold the Inkwell Review to a private investor for a nominal sum, who then sold it to another party and eventually to Artemis. But none of the subsequent transactions had acknowledged or transferred the 3% ownership stake. According to our attorneys, the stake had legally transferred with each sale, meaning Artemis now owned 3% of Lancaster Publishing. This discovery coincided with a financial crisis at Lancaster. Years of declining print revenue and failed digital initiatives had left the company overextended, with several banks calling in loans. Industry rumors suggested they were seeking emergency investment or considering selling premier assets. I saw an opportunity not just for business advantage, but for a reckoning. Through careful, quiet maneuvering over the next year, Artemis Digital achieved 3 key objectives. First, we acquired 2 more publications previously sold off by Lancaster, each with similar dormant ownership stakes, bringing our total ownership in Lancaster Publishing to 7%. Second, we formed a strategic partnership with my mother, creating a voting trust that combined her 10% ownership with Artemis's 7%. Third, and most importantly, we positioned Artemis Digital as a potential acquisition target for Lancaster Publishing, leaking data about our remarkable success in digital transformation and revenue growth to industry publications. The bait was set, and Alex, predictably, took it. always looking for quick fixes rather than structural change. He saw acquiring a successful digital media company as a way to appease his board and creditors without having to transform Lancaster's fundamental operations. When the acquisition offer came, I feigned reluctance, insisting on a premium valuation and specific terms that would give me oversight of digital strategy. Alex, believing he could sideline me after the acquisition was complete, agreed to all conditions without thorough due diligence. Which brings us to today. The final signing of acquisition documents in Lancaster Publishing's mahogany panel boardroom. Alex sitting at the head of the table where his father once sat, sliding papers toward me with that same dismissive smile he'd worn since we were teenagers. Acquisition terms are final, he announced. Congratulations, Rebecca. You built something worth stealing. I signed the documents without comment, then watched as he did the same. Now, he continued, as discussed, you'll lead our new digital division, reporting directly to our Chief Operating Officer. We've prepared an announcement about Lancaster Publishing's expansion into digital media through the strategic acquisition. That won't be necessary, I replied, nodding to my attorney, who distributed folders to everyone present. I've prepared my own announcement. Alex frowned, opening the folder. What is this? The complete record of ownership transfers of the Inkwell Review and 2 other publications, along with the original trust documents establishing their connected ownership stakes in Lancaster Publishing. Combined with my mother's shares, we now control 17% of Lancaster Publishing. His face paled. This is absurd. Our legal team would have. Your legal team did review these publications before you sold them, I interrupted. But they failed to recognize the significance of provisions hidden in original acquisition agreements from the 1960s. The evidence is irrefutable and has been verified by 3 independent law firms. The Lancaster executives exchanged alarmed glances as my attorney continued. Furthermore, the terms of the acquisition you just signed include a share exchange that effectively converts Artemis Digital's private shares into Lancaster Publishing voting shares, with a 3-year lockup period preventing executive leadership from selling their positions. You can't possibly. With the additional shares created through the acquisition terms you just approved, our voting position increases to 23%, I continued calmly, combined with the 12% held by board members who have already pledged their support for new leadership. We now control 35% of voting shares. According to Lancaster's bylaws, that's sufficient to call for a vote of no confidence in current management. The color had completely drained from Alex's face. This is a hostile takeover. No, Alex. This is a correction. You've systematically destroyed what your grandfather and father built. Lancaster's market value has declined 60% under your leadership. 4 of your flagship publications are on the verge of bankruptcy. The company has lost its editorial direction and failed to establish any coherent digital strategy. I closed my folder and looked directly at him. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare a transition plan. You planned this from the beginning, he said, his voice hollow with shock. All those years. Not from the beginning, I corrected him. I didn't plan anything until you made it clear there would never be a place for me in this company, despite what your father wanted. You taught me an important lesson, Alex. Blood may be thicker than water, but ink, contracts, written words, legal documents, ink is thicker than blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The board voted overwhelmingly to remove Alex from his position as CEO, installing me as interim chief executive while a search committee identified permanent leadership. I had no intention of running Lancaster Publishing long-term. My passion remained with Artemis Digital and our model of thoughtful transformation, but I needed to stabilize the company and establish new strategic direction. Alex disappeared to his summer home in the Hamptons, refusing all communication. Most of his executive team resigned or were dismissed as the full extent of mismanagement became clear. The company's financial situation was even worse than industry rumors had suggested, with several signature publications literally weeks away from collapse. I assembled a transition team combining Lancaster veterans who had been sidelined under Alex's leadership with digital strategists from Artemis. Together, we developed a 3-year recovery plan focused on preserving editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue models, exactly the approach that had succeeded at Artemis, but at much larger scale. 6 months into the transformation, Lancaster Publishing held its annual holiday party at the Boston Public Library, a tradition my stepfather had established decades earlier. As I stood addressing the gathered employees, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me there. Publishing has never been about platforms, I told them. Whether words appear on paper or screens, what matters is their quality, their integrity, and their impact. Lancaster's century of excellence was built on understanding that content creates the relationship with readers. Everything else is just delivery. We lost sight of that fundamental truth for a while, but we're finding our way back. After the speech, as I circulated among staff, a senior editor who had worked with my stepfather approached. "Richard would be proud," she said, touching my arm. "He always told me you understood publishing in your bones," said you reminded him of his father, the original Lancaster who built all this. "Thank you," I replied, unexpectedly moved. "I wish he could see what we're building now." "Oh, he sees," she smiled. "And so does someone else." She nodded toward the entrance, where Alex stood awkwardly, looking out of place in the company he had led for nearly a decade. I crossed the room to meet him, unsure what to expect. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I almost didn't." He looked around the room, at the animated conversations between print editors and digital strategists, at the displays showcasing both heritage publications and new digital initiatives. "You've changed things." "We had to. The company was dying." He nodded slowly. "I received the quarterly reports. The digital subscription numbers are impressive." Coming from Alex, this qualified as effusive praise. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I never gave you a chance," he finally said. "From the beginning, I saw you as a threat. The way Dad looked at you. He never looked at me that way. He was proud of you too, Alex. He just showed it differently." "Maybe." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said, about ink being thicker than blood. You were right about the contracts, but wrong about what matters most. Dad built this company for family. Whatever our differences, that's what we are." He extended his hand, offering a small leather-bound book. "This was his personal journal from the year he married your mother. I thought you should have it." I accepted the journal, unexpectedly touched by the gesture. "Thank you." "I'm starting something new," he continued. "A publishing consultancy, smaller scale, focused on areas I actually understand. I'd like your advice sometime, if you're willing." It wasn't an apology, exactly, but from Alex, it represented significant evolution. "I'd be happy to talk," I replied. "Families should help each other." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Alex, there will always be a place for you at Lancaster, when you're ready." He nodded once, then disappeared into the December evening. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible after so many years of animosity, but the company Richard Lancaster had built deserved to have both his children involved in its future, each contributing their distinct strengths. The journal Alex had given me felt significant in my hands, a piece of family history passing from one generation to the next. Later that night, alone in my office overlooking Boston Harbor, I opened Richard's journal. Inside the cover, he had written a single line that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Family is not defined by blood alone, but by those who preserve our stories. In publishing as in families, what endures is not who owns the legacy, but who honors it, who ensures that the stories and values continue to matter in a changing world." By those measures, Lancaster Publishing was in good hands, regardless of whose name appeared on the masthead. Sometimes the most meaningful victories aren't about winning control, but about restoring purpose. Ink may secure ownership, but only vision preserves legacy.